blizzard is raging as I speak, actually, across the Highlands and the Grampians. So here, a lot of heavy, deep blowing snow through this evening. But for most places, as you say, it's the wind and the rain.
Eurostar services to and from London St Pancras have been cancelled this afternoon because a tunnel's flooded. This morning, Eurostar said it hoped later services could run, but it has now cancelled all 41 trains of people trying to leave the country. Well, the Met Office has also issued 6 warnings today, mainly for wind and rain across parts of the UK. John Hammond is a meteorologist and joins us now. Hello, John.
Hi there, Rick.
It's normal for this time of year, isn't it? But it has been relentless. I mean, do you remember a Christmas with so much constant drizzle?
If only it was drizzle. If it was just drizzle, we wouldn't have such problems with flooding. But it's been rather more than drizzle, actually, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, really. It's been a very wet run up to Christmas and now through the Christmas period. And guess what? New Year, same old weather. There's no signs of a big shift in the weather patterns for at least another week or so, Rick. So as we head into the first few days of 2024, I'm expecting further warnings for wind and rain and, for some places, snow. A blizzard is raging as I speak, actually, across the Highlands and the Grampians. So here, a lot of heavy, deep blowing snow through this evening. But for most places, as you say, it's the wind and the rain. And I think the focus of concern as we go through this evening and overnight, Rick, will be actually across the more southern and central parts of England and Wales, where it has just been drizzly so far today. That rain is really going to turn torrential in a very narrow, discrete band. It's going to move its way west to east through this evening. It's already pouring, actually, across parts of Wales and the southwest of England. And that line, that front, is going to move its way eastwards. Within that, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we get reports of 1 or 2 tornadoes. Now, of course, a day or so ago, we had tornadoes ravaging parts of Greater Manchester. The possibility is there. The ingredients are in there atmospherically for something to happen towards the south coast in particular. It's one to keep an eye on through the latter part of this evening towards midnight into the early hours. For most, just very heavy rain and very, very strong winds for a spell as that front moves its way eastwards. Beyond that, Rick, into tomorrow, New Year's Eve, unsettled, disturbed, windy, especially again across southern areas. Further north, the winds will be lighter, but it just means that the showers will last longer. And to be honest, Rick, for the next week or so, as I mentioned, with low pressure still dominant, low pressure tends to suck up moisture, shove it up into the atmosphere and produce big, big clouds, hence the very wet spell. Nothing really changing until we get to next weekend. And then there are increasing indications from computer models that we are going to see a significant change in the weather, with much drier but much colder
conditions. That's good to hear for many people, John, I'm sure. You mentioned tornadoes there, and I noticed that there is something called the Tornado and Storm Research Organisation, TORO. And they've warned that these parts of the UK, you mentioned the south coast, could see these isolated tornadoes. But when you hear tornadoes, I mean, how rare is that in the UK? I remember covering one as, a junior reporter about 10 years ago in West London that took off someone's roof. We've seen those pictures from Manchester, John, but they're still rather rare, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the chances of being hit by a tornado in any one place at any one time is almost vanishingly small. But of course, when and where they do hit, the impacts are absolutely devastating. They're not as rare as perhaps you might think. We always associate tornadoes with Tornado Alley in the States.
Yes.
Tornadoes happen in this country surprisingly frequently, particularly in the wintertime, and particularly when you've got this very unstable setup in the atmosphere with low pressure and a lot of moisture, and actually what we call helicity. In other words, the propensity for the atmosphere to start to spin. And that's the ingredient we've got this evening with a cold front coming in from the west, and that's going to start to suck in the air, suck in the moisture, and it could cause some rotation. And that's what TORO, that organisation you mentioned, will be keeping a very, very close eye on. These are experts in tornado formation, and it is towards the south coast where that likelihood is greatest. It may well be, Rick, that we don't see any tornadoes, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody somewhere gets a rude awakening overnight tonight. That risk diminishes as we go into tomorrow, but further impacts from wind and rain, I think, are likely up and down the country for the next several days. And then that big change that I mentioned earlier on. And in fact, in 10 days' time, shall we say, we could well be talking about impacts from snowfall and severe frost. So that's one to watch.
Yeah.
But I think many of us will be relieved to get rid of wind and rain and replace it with something drier and crisper, and altogether more seasonal, shall we say.
John, very briefly, if you could, when we look back at 2023 from a UK weather perspective, how wet has it been?
It's actually going to turn out to have been a very wet year after what was a pretty dry start to the year. In actual fact, it's been a year of dramatic contrast, but one common theme has been the warmth. Just about every month of this year has been warmer than the historical averages. And basically that tells us that our climate is not the same climate which many of us grew up with. The change in temperature over just 30 years, the change in the average temperature of more than a degree in a 30-year period is quite a remarkable shift in a very short space of time. And a warmer atmosphere holds more water. So we shouldn't be at all surprised that it's been a wet year, because with warmth, generally speaking, comes increasing intensity of rainfall. And that's something we're going to have to adapt to and get used to in the years ahead.